Yep.
So when you guys were doing the, well, let me go back a little bit, Fandango. So when Fandango first came out, and I don't remember too much, but I remember when he first came out, it was a real big hit. The song was really over. You were
Yep.
in England. The people were singing it. Like you were a really hot thing. I think Jericho did it, put you over.
Yeah.
And
WrestleMania.
like they had really big plans for you, if I do remember correctly. What happened?
They were getting ready to put the IC title on me in a triple threat match at one of the pay-per-views post WrestleMania. I got a concussion wrestling Great Khali. I didn't tell the office about it, and I got a lot of heat for it. So actually, I got knocked out again, and
What year was this?
I stooged myself off because I thought it was the prior concussion. You know, sometimes when you get knocked out, you go back to where you actually got knocked out. You know, your wires get all. So I stooged myself off, and they're like, "Oh, you were Khali last week on the show," and I'm like, "Oh, well, that's when I got knocked out." And they're like, "Well, you didn't tell us." And then this is when they start implementing, you know, the protocols for concussions, and you know, which makes sense. And so I got.
But what year was this? What year was this?
2013.
Yeah.
What is your name? Because I don't feel weird calling you Dango. What is
Kurt.
Kurt.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
What year was this?
So you court. You have to call your court. Right?
Yeah. I have problems saying the word court.
I got a question. I got a question here when you talked about that. So you got a concussion. And then you got heat from the office for not reporting it, right?
Yeah.
So what is so? I know that like when.
Let me tell you how weird the business is, Court. When we were wrestling, if you reported a concussion, you would get heat.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, but here's my point. The psychology changed over the course of time because we found out about CTE. So then there was a big thing like, oh, you know, concussion is like a big deal, right? And then so everybody's like reporting concussions, very cognizant of it and everything. I see like lately though, like the last few. I mean, I'm watching a lot of TV, like wrestling on TV. It seems like there'd be a lot of more of unreported concussions today.
Oh, for sure.
Because I see guys doing these spots where they're constantly getting kicked upside the head.
Yeah.
And nobody's putting their hands up to protect themselves.
Yeah, we're running
like we learned. And I'm just wondering, how often do these guys get their bell rung and they're not saying anything because it's just like, well, you just get shook up. But that's still technically concussion. Now, when you had your concussion, did you get knocked? You got knocked out, or was it like
knocked out?
What happened?
Knocked out, by Khali. Pretty severe concussion. I mean, there's different degrees of concussions. You know, you probably you see stars. There's the whole spectrum of them, but it was a pretty bad one, and I try to work through it because I knew where we were going with the storyline.
Right.
And it was.
So were you like okay, I'm about to get the AC title. I'm saying anything about the concussion.
Yeah, I mean,
because that's how we think. Yeah,
exactly. And I broke in 1999. I've been wrestling a long time at that point, 14 years. So I mean, I wasn't when I first broke in. That was what you did, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do. But
you don't know any other way because that's the only thing you know. You know,
so they got hot, which I understand. And at the time I was 29, 30, and I was a different cat back then, man. I was a lot cockier, and I had a little bit of an attitude. So,
but what? Let me ask you this. Because once you start getting a push, especially somebody like you that came out of nowhere and you've been grinding and all that, bro, what was it like, the pressure and the jealousy from, other wrestlers and the politics? Because now you're in the spotlight and now is when the politics really start to... Yeah.
Everybody's your friend when you're doing dark matches. That's what I realized.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because he's lovable.
Right.
He's a nice guy.
Right.
And then you really figure out who your real friends are when you start to get a little momentum. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it gets really tight. It gets real tight. And but when the boys start, then I know who the are and who's insecure. You know what I'm saying? So I already know that I got them thinking. So the guys, like my whole thing is like, you think The Rock was in catering, gossiping about like the Godwins or, the headbangers, nothing against those guys, but
he was thinking of promos, cool to wear.
Yeah. And you got to put your energy in the right places.
Right.
And at the time, things did get a little bit weirder in the locker room.
Because I've noticed that from a booking standpoint.
Yeah.
That, or even when I was wrestling in Mexico, where I had a higher I was higher on the food chain than I was in the United States, that, once you start giving a guy a push, it's like you guys start coming and start to bury him, and you start seeing the jealousy. But also you're in a sport where there's a lot of competition, that it's an atmosphere of mistrust and, jealousy that's been fostered throughout the years. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And people, so I assume that happened to you.